Hello, everybody. This is Professor Joseph Holbrook. This semester, I'm offering a new class called Christianity in the Caribbean. It's basically a course that deals with the attitudes and the actions of Catholics and Protestants in the Caribbean with regards to slavery, the slave trade, and race from about 1500 up through the end of the 20th century, early 21st century with Pentecostalism. So we start with Catholicism, then the Church of England and the Dutch Reformed Church, and then the nonconformist sects, uh, Quakers, Moravians. Moravians technically were not nonconformists because they were from Germany, but Methodists, Baptists, and then later on the Pentecostals. So fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. I'm going to begin today talking about an excellent book by Kristen Block called Ordinary Lives in the Caribbean. Let me see if I can get rid of this. And I don't know how. All right, let's not worry about it. So, Christianity in the Caribbean, Ordinary Lives in the Early Caribbean by Kristen Block, published in 2012 by the University of Georgia Press. Now, this might work better. Let's move it over here. Nope, that's not working. We'll stay here. Um, Excellent book. Uh, Dr. Block uses a type of subaltern resistance approach of trying to tease out history from below instead of writing the history from the point of view of the victors. And so that requires that she uses court records and Inquisition records and that she pieced together information about people who are voiceless in history. In this case, in the first three chapters, particularly, she's looking at some experiences of Isabella Criolla, who was a slave, a mulatto, an African slave, but born in Colombia in around 1633. So let's just jump into it. So here's kind of an outline. Doña Eufrasia de Camargo was the owner of a group of slaves in Mompox, Colombia. Mompox is a small city on the coast of the Caribbean coast of Colombia, not too far inland from Cartagena. She is known to have excessive cruelty and brutality towards her slaves, particularly the female slaves. Isabella Criolla was the particular slave that the historian had records for and traced her process through a court proceeding. There were four other slaves of Camargo that died beaten to death without confession, and a couple of other fellow slaves that were still alive and joined the lawsuit to try to get court protection from Camargo's cruelty. And so the story goes the governor was sympathetic to her story after she is sent to the man who sent out Alvarez his job is to track down runaway slaves. He finds Isabella Criolla. She pleads with him to not send her back to her owner, Doña Eufrasia de Camargo, and shows him the wounds and beatings and scars on her buttocks and her hips as proof of the inhumane treatment she's receiving. Alvarez is sympathetic. She appeals to him as a fellow Christian that if she is sent back to Camargo, she fears that she'll lose her soul, not only her life but her soul. And so Alvarez sends her to Cartagena in a boat journey. She appears before the governor of Cartagena. He is horrified by some of the things he hears from her about her owner. So he sends an investigator named Lorenzo de Soto to Mompox to investigate. Several chapters are taken up with his extensive investigation. He finds that all of the slaves confirm what Isabella has been saying. Uh, but uh, the white Colombians in the village of Mompox refuse to go along there. They stonewall and they side with Doña Camargo. And so he comes up short on evidence because the court is not likely to take the evidence of slaves, the witness of slaves, with the same credibility that it would take white Colombians. And so she's taken back to Cartagena. She goes to a court trial. The court in Cartagena, the provincial court, finds in her favor and the favor of the other slaves that are in the court proceeding. The governor is supportive of that decision. However, in the end, Doña Eufrasia Camargo appeals to the Supreme Court in Bogota, and the Supreme Court reverses the finding and orders that the slaves be sent back to Doña Eufrasia, who has already sworn publicly that she will have their bones and blood. In other words, that she will beat them to death when she gets possession of them. Along the way, Isabella's son, Pedro Criollo, comes back to Mompox and eventually to Cartagena to testify. When he's an escaped slave who's been living in a palenque. A palenque is a maroon community of slaves that have fled from Spanish control and are living in a remote area on their own, free from slavery. He comes back and risks being re-enslaved in order to testify on behalf of his mother, hoping that justice might finally be done. Along the way, we find out that Pope Urban, during this time period, condemns the slave trade. There's a discussion about the Siete Partidas, which was a medieval uh, uh, law in Spain based on Roman law, offering guidelines and protections to slaves and putting limits on what could be done to slaves. This was this was not color-based slavery, but Roman slavery that it was addressed to, and it was in the context of the war between the Spanish Castilian Catholics and the North African Moors or Muslims for over a period of several centuries in the Iberian Peninsula. So the governor in the court in Cartagena finds in favor of Isabella, but the Supreme Court in Bogota reverses the finding, and the last we hear is that Isabella is being sent back to her owner. Pedro Criollo, at the end of the story, it's reported that he has escaped for a second time and has gone back into the wilderness to live in the Palenque. This is a picture of the greater Caribbean, and you see right here, this is the northwestern coast of Colombia. Barranquilla is around here, and Cartagena is about here. This is considered by many people to be part of the Caribbean. In Colombia, the people that live along this stretch are called Los Costeños, and they are considered more Caribbean than they are the people of the interior. Another picture here from Google Maps shows us this is Mompox, and up here is Cartagena. This is the Magdalena River. Up through here, it looks like a series of lakes. The Magdalena River comes down out of the mountains. It's a concentrated river initially, but by the time the mountains are right about here, by the time it comes out of the mountains into the plain area, it's kind of like the Mississippi, the mouth of the Mississippi in New Orleans, where it just kind of spreads out and it becomes swampland all through here. And so when Isabella Criolla is sent to Cartagena, she goes by boat up this river. It comes out around here somewhere and then up along the coast. So this is the area where this story takes place. By the way, this is also the same area where 100 Years of Solitude, the fictional story by Garcia Marquez, is set right in this area right here. So I've mentioned already the Siete Partidas, that the Catholic Church offered some protection to their slaves. They get a bad rap many times for the treatment of the indigenous peoples initially. But the Siete Partidas gave them some kind of guidelines that allowed them to put limits on the way that owners treated their slaves. England did not have anything like this, and so in North America, and in the English Caribbean, there were not the same protections or limitations uh, on slavery. And so, in so many ways, it's known that many times English slaves in English-speaking islands would, or even in South Carolina, would attempt to escape to Spanish territories where they could convert to Catholicism and at least have some limited rights as baptized Catholics. So the Catholic Church law stipulated a series of rights and obligations between master and slaves, requiring that slaves be provided with Christian education, have time off to attend Mass and go to confession at least once a year, and have access to the sacrament of marriage, and some protections for conjugal residency. What this means is that a Spanish slave owner, if he had a couple who were married in the Catholic Church, he couldn't sell off the wife or the husband randomly and separate them. He either had to sell them together so that they could go together, or he had to keep them. So that's a big difference with the 13 colonies in the United States, for example, or the English-speaking slave islands in the Caribbean. The Quran also provides protections for slaves, similar to the Siete Partidas. The Catholic Church in Spanish America worked to Christianize, Creolize, and educate Indian and African pagans, quote unquote, about their subordinate position in the New World. Cartagena in this time period in 1633 had about 4,500 people. There were twice as many Africans or Afro-Colombians as there were white Colombians or Spanish. There's two words that are used in the reading. One is Creole. So an African Creole is an African whose parents were brought from Africa, but they themselves were born in the American hemisphere. That's Creole. Ladino is a African slave, or it could be a freed person, but an African that's brought to the New World, and they learn Spanish and they're baptized as a Catholic, so they become Hispanicized. They're still born in Africa, but they are Hispanicized, and they are called Ladinos and Creoles. During this time period in Cartagena, there were two notable Jesuits working and residing in Cartagena in a mission to the slaves. One was Alonso de Sandoval, who was the founder of the mission to the slaves in Cartagena, and his assistant Pedro Calver, who eventually was canonized as the Saint of the Slaves. And Cartagena was also the seat of the Inquisition. It's likely that Isabella Criolla had been sexually abused by Camargo's husband. It's interesting that the target of Doña Eufrasia de Camargo's rage and brutality was almost all women, and she beat them on their buttocks and around the private parts. So that this was a woman who felt scorned and was in competition with her female slaves, and her husband had most likely, this is speculation, but most likely had been cheating on her with the slaves, and so she tortured and brutalized the slaves. So they were thrisely exploited and brutalized. They were exploited as slaves. They were exploited sexually by the male owner, the patriarch of the home, and then they were tormented and tortured by his wife. It's kind of a view right out of hell. Blasphemy was one way that they could get remanded to the Inquisition. Interestingly enough, for all the bad things we hear about the Inquisition, one positive thing about the Inquisition is that it would take steps to enforce the Siete Partidas and enforce protections for slaves when they were baptized Catholics. If they found that the slave was being greatly abused by their owners in extreme ways that were unchristian in the views of the Inquisition might move to try to find some mercy and protection for the slaves. And so many times slaves would deliberately commit blasphemy in order to get themselves remanded to the Inquisition where they could appeal their case. They would say, "Reniego a Dios," I renounce God. That was a way to blaspheme at that time. And so I've already mentioned the court found in their behalf and we tried to protect them, but then the Supreme Court in Bogota reversed it, and we don't know the end of the story. But unless she was able to escape again, it's probably not good. Thank you for your time and attention. This is just the first third of Kristen Block's book, and we'll be talking about the other parts later down the course, in which she looks at Cromwell's grand design, Western design to attempt to try to take territories from the Spanish, which was pretty much a failure, but did bring Protestants into the Caribbean. And we'll also take a look at Quakers in the island of Barbados. Okay, thank you. Take care. Have a good week.